think someone who we all admire, and probably most of us were sitting there a couple of weeks ago cheering on question time. The chap here to my left, and I'm sure lots of people say that, the gentleman to my left, Mark Serwotka, one of the first trade union leaders to support Justice for Jays, a campaign that we're going to hear a lot more about later this evening. Mark started as a 16-year-old clerical officer in the DHSS. Now, some of the younger people here might not know what the DHSS was. It was the forerunner of the DSSS, the DSS. I think today that's now the DWP, isn't it? You know, it's changed so many times. And Mark, as I understand, served 21 years in the benefits service, which almost sounds like a prison sentence. I understand that he's held a wide range of union positions, and including responsibility for employment tribunals. Now, I've been involved in an employment tribunal myself, and I know how stressful that is, so all power to your elbow. He's now General Secretary of the Public and Commercial Services Union, the PCS, which many of us will be aware of having their conferences in Brighton this week. Mark stood as a socialist candidate, and he was a rank and file branch secretary when he stood. And he's almost unique amongst TUC leaders as having come straight from the shop floor to take leadership of one of the main unions in this country. And he's a passionate believer in public services and the welfare state. But to end on what he claims is a high note, some of us here might take issue with that. He's also a dedicated Cardiff City fan. So we just ask for some restraint, please, from Seagulls fans in the audience tonight, because we do know that he's suffered a loss recently. Mark Serwotka.
Well, thanks very much for that introduction. It's not just a recent loss, it's 41 years in pain, but anyway. I'm delighted to get the chance to speak. I know we've got a number of panel members, and I apologise that I have to leave and later Zita, but we've got a meeting of our National Executive Committee later on tonight on the eve of our conference, which is quite important. But I wanted to come and speak on behalf of PCS, because the theme of this meeting is United We Stand Tackling Racism. And what I think we're going to hear across the panel tonight is the whole different type of forms racism can take, what happens when people are scapegoated and one person turns against another. And I think our job has to be recognising it, supporting those who are leading the campaigns against it in whatever form it takes, but actually understanding the key to try and make arguments against the politics of division and hate. And in that sense, I want to start with the fact that even though people have been fighting racism for a long time, there is no doubt that the period we are now in, with unprecedented austerity being imposed upon working people, working class people, the length and breadth of the UK, that what we actually face is a society that is either going to go backwards rapidly and become bleaker and much more miserable for all of us, or it's going to be one where we unlock the key to fighting back against austerity, and as such, stop this denial of resources that have the effect of turning one person against another. And in that sense, for me, the key to all of this is to say the answer isn't a fight over diminishing resources. It is actually to say we want a bigger slice of the cake. It shouldn't be people who didn't cause the problem who end up paying a massive price for the folly of those at the top. That we actually need a more equal society, and we need to unite people against what the government is doing. And in that sense, therefore, I think we have to recognise that the government has a very clear strategy. And as I'll mention in a minute, it's supported by some of the worst elements of the media in actually trying to divide people up, to compartmentalise us all, so that people worry about their own particular issues and they don't see the wider problem. The more we are divided, the more they believe they'll get away with actually what they want to do. And we've seen that in the last few months over a divide between public and private sector workers, for example. We see the divide between being told it's between those people who are in work and those people who aren't working their work share. We're being told it's between people who are lucky enough to get an education and those who pay their taxes to send people to college. And then we see that divide that is between black and white, migrants and people who were born in the UK, and an attempt in some way to say some people are deserving and some people aren't. And that is a deliberate strategy that the government has, and it's one that we have to counter. Our union takes the view the best way to counter it is to say the real divide is between the haves and the have-nots. We represent the have-nots. They represent the tiny elite at the top who are the haves, who have absolutely tons of money and are holding it while we pay the price. And therefore, if that is what the government is actually doing, I think the key to unlocking our response is contained within some of the greatest Labour movement slogans. And some of the greater Labour movement slogans are very simple, but I think they do what they say on the tin. Workers united will never be defeated. Unity is strength. Together we're stronger. United we stand, divided we fall. They're all quite simple, but they tell a very clear message. That if we keep people together and try and defend each other and argue on behalf of all of our people, then what it does is it means we are a much stronger force, and it is much, much harder for people to get away with divide and rule. And every day at the moment we're seeing the dangers if we don't find such an approach. It's very good that we've already heard from the Chair's opening remarks that the BNP and the other far-right parties contested recent elections. They didn't win a single seat that they fought anywhere throughout the UK. It's also very heartening, I think, that where people had a chance, they voted against austerity. The coalition government did particularly badly, and in other parts of Europe, people voted against austerity. But that's one part of the battle. The other part is that daily grind that we're having to face that can often turn itself into the pernicious stuff of racism. Let me give you a direct example of what we're involved in. People will have seen that the borders have been absolutely top front news because people are queuing at Heathrow. And the real story here is about public sector cuts. Huge cuts in the workforce, and what this has proved is that if you cut public sector jobs, you can't pretend that you can do as much with it. But what has the Daily Mail turned it into? The Daily Mail has turned it into a story of illegal immigrants sneaking into the country, terrorists who now may be on the rampage, immediately seeing an opportunity to turn a story that's really about cuts and public sector services into one that is negative and is about racism and division. And that's just one example that we have to deal with. If we look at how the media has acted on a number of other issues over recent years, it is truly frightening. And the media are encouraged, I think, by politicians to seek to perpetuate these divisions. I'll just give you a couple of examples, but The Sun claimed in 2003 on a front page headline that asylum seekers are eating the Queen's swans. Now, it's hard to believe that this sort of stuff goes on, but that was in The Sun in 2003. Now, you could say you couldn't make it up. Unfortunately, they did make it up. It wasn't true. And of course, The Sun were then forced to publish a retraction some period after, which they printed on page 41. Now, I have never attempted to get past page 1 of The Sun, let alone to page 41, but it tells you something about the inequality of what we're actually dealing with. Big headlines designed to stoke up resentment and division and turn one person against another, and we are then having to pick up the pieces and fight a rearguard action. Now, PCS has got Doreen Lawrence coming to our conference tomorrow, and part of the reason again Doreen Lawrence to come is to come and talk about the incredible campaign she's had to wage to get some justice for the murderers of her son. It's good that some people have finally been imprisoned, but there's still a lot of unfinished business. You're going to hear tonight from Michael Aberton, who is the brother of Jay, who is another person who has been killed, in our view, through a racist assault. These are the real human cost that some people are having to pay currently because of hatred and division that has been irresponsibly whipped up by people in the media and by politicians. Our job has to be to say they are the clearest and most distressing examples, and we've got to stick with people like Michael and Doreen who want to expose what has happened and raise the real questions of institutional racism. But there are other things also that we have to do quickly, and I'll finish on this point. You know, I never thought I'd see the day when I came to PCS conference to be told that people in Newham in London are being told by their Labour Council that they should potentially be rehoused in Stoke-on-Trent because they can no longer afford the welfare bill. Now, I've never been to Stoke-on-Trent. I'm sure it's a nice place, not as nice as Wales, but nevertheless, I'm sure it's fine. But the point here is, who are these people in Newham who will be forced to move? People who live in these communities, whose kids go to school in Newham, who, there you go, I'm sure Zika will tell you all about it then. And the point is that why are people being stigmatised and told, we can't afford welfare, so you may now have to pay a terrible price? It's a really good example of how the disproportionate effect of austerity is going to pick on many of the most vulnerable people, try to get away with it by creating divide and rule and appealing to other people to say, well, we can't afford it. Well, here's a solution I'll finish on. Wouldn't it be great if the council in Newham and the government actually said, The answer to the terrible housing benefit bill that is spiralling out of control is to tackle the landlords who are trousering millions of pounds worth of profits rather than those people who depend on small example, but if we did that, if we stand with Michael and Doreen and others who are campaigning, if we stand with asylum seekers and those people who are seeking refuge in this country, we not only stand for a fairer society, we actually strike back at the heart of divide and rule, which is designed to stigmatise and divide people to ensure that we can't unite and fight back. That's our message at our conference. I hope that's one you agree with, and it's been a pleasure to come.